Okay, let's dive into this. I was recently looking into something that affects pretty much every single one of us in the modern world. I found this absolutely fascinating breakdown of how overstimulation is just quietly rewiring our brains. But more importantly, it lays out a highly effective, science-backed, six-step solution to actually break free from it. So we're going to explore the neuroscience behind why we feel completely compelled to constantly check our phones, play games, or consume content, and how we can finally take our lives back.
I mean, seriously? Why is it that we can't just sit down and eat a meal anymore without immediately pulling up a YouTube video or scrolling through social media? It's a highly relatable symptom of a much, much larger problem. We've literally reached a point where we require stimulation every single second of the day. It's not just about traditional addictions anymore. It's this constant, lingering need for our brains to be entertained.
So, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover 1. The modern addiction trap, 2. The dopamine roller coaster, 3. Awareness and replacement, 4. Obsessions and mental health, 5. Changing your identity, and 6. Bouncing back from relapse. We're going to cover the root cause and give you a highly actionable framework. All right, starting off with section 1, the modern addiction trap. When we hear the word addiction, we usually picture drugs or alcohol, right? But today, it's endless scrolling and gaming. It has become a daily necessity to just be constantly stimulated. And the stakes here are incredibly high. Overindulging drags us down a really miserable path. The source material bluntly points out that this path turns us into addicts, or perhaps even worse, an internet recluse like a stereotypical Discord mod. But look at the other side of the coin. By avoiding these destructive habits, we open the door to becoming productive, confident, ambitious, and ultimately fulfilled. We all want that fulfilled path, for sure, but we often find ourselves stuck on day 1 of quitting, just fighting this constant uphill battle. Which brings us to section 2, the dopamine roller coaster. Before we can fix this, we have to understand exactly how addiction works in the brain's reward system. When we do something pleasurable, like eating chocolate or playing video games, our dopamine goes up. We feel happy. But, in life, everything is temporary. What goes up must come down. So the crucial point is understanding this concept of baseline dopamine. When your dopamine spikes from a pleasurable activity, it doesn't just neatly return to normal afterward. It actually drops below your baseline. And when your dopamine drops below baseline, you experience some intensely unpleasant things: tiredness, lack of focus, lack of motivation, and hopelessness. It's that heavy feeling when you literally just want to rot in bed all day. Your brain hates this discomfort, so what does it do? It seeks more instant pleasure to bring those levels back up as fast as possible. And boom, the cycle repeats. And this leads us to the critical difference between fast versus slow dopamine. The higher and faster your dopamine rises, the deeper and faster the crash. Activities like video games or consuming adult content spike dopamine incredibly fast, which leads to a massive, painful drop that trains your brain to crave immediate relief. On the flip side, slow dopamine activities, things like reading a book, doing yoga, or drawing, offer lasting rewards without that extreme crash. This perfectly explains why a video game addict finds it almost physically impossible to just sit down and read a book. Their brain has been totally wired to only respond to rapid, extreme spikes. Let's move to the solution in section 3, awareness and replacement. If someone tells you to just stop playing video games, it rarely works because the habit is practically baked into your daily routine, kind of like brushing your teeth. You can't just delete it. You need a system. The first 2 steps of that system are self-awareness and healthy replacement. Step 1 is having the self-awareness to admit you actually have a problem. The source highlights a great example here. People who claim they just play video games to, relax and socialize. But in reality, they spend 8 hours a day screaming into a microphone and destroying their mental health over a bad teammate. That is a total lack of self-awareness. The activity is controlling them. You absolutely have to admit it's an issue first. Then comes step 2, healthy replacement. Going cold turkey, it usually fails because it leaves a massive void in your daily routine and your dopamine supply. Instead, you have to find a healthy alternative that raises dopamine slowly. The source shares this fascinating personal story of replacing a severe League of Legends addiction with working out. By spending time at the gym and then spending free time learning about fitness on YouTube, that void was filled. The dopamine started coming from the feeling of a good workout and the joy of seeing physical progress, which naturally pushed the video games completely out of the picture. Next up is section 4, obsessions and mental health. But what happens when replacing the habit isn't quite enough? Sometimes the addiction is so deeply ingrained that just reading a book or going to the gym leaves a bit too much idle time, which allows you to sneak in a few hours of your old habit. That is exactly where step 3 comes in. Create an obsession. If the bad habit is powerful, your new healthy habit needs to be even more powerful. You need a goal that totally consumes your mental space. For the source, this meant starting a YouTube channel and becoming entirely obsessed with growing it. Because they were constantly working on and thinking about the channel, there was literally zero mental space left for video games. Exploring and creating new, productive interests is an absolute game changer here. Now, even with a strong obsession, urges are still going to pop up. And the source points out a fascinating cognitive trick for when they do. Don't resist the urge. I know that sounds backwards, but if you sit there thinking, don't play, resist, you are still focusing entirely on the bad habit, which almost always leads to giving in. Instead, the strategy is to immediately substitute the thought with something completely unrelated and purely happy. Think of a pleasant childhood memory, like your parents pushing you on a swing and you laughing. Shifting your mental focus to a pleasant, non-addictive memory derails the craving far better than sheer willpower ever could. And that leads directly to step 4, which is improving your baseline mental health. We often relapse into bad habits simply because we feel crappy. When we feel crappy, we seek out fast dopamine to escape the feeling. But if your mental health is solid to begin with, you just don't feel the need to escape. Here are the actionable tactics to build that baseline. Meditate. Practice gratitude for the little things. Talk to people. Get in physical shape. Be kind. And, as the source jokingly but seriously notes, stop playing League of Legends. Moving on to section 5, changing your identity. And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute deepest layer of breaking an addiction. You can build habits all day, but if you don't change how you view yourself, you will always be fighting your own nature. The source recounts struggling with an addiction to adult content, even after fixing their diet and quitting gaming. What finally stopped it wasn't a strict schedule. It was meeting someone they wanted a real relationship with. They realized they simply couldn't visualize this person wanting to be with a version of themselves that had this addiction. This leads to a truly profound realization. People act in line with the person they think they are. If you internally identify as an addict trying to quit, you will continue to struggle. But if you fundamentally shift your self-image, if you view yourself as someone who already has their life together, the urges just vanish. A person who has their life completely together simply doesn't have those addictions. You have to actively strive to be that ideal person in your mind every single day. Finally, section 6, bouncing back from relapse. We have to be realistic here. You are going to have bad days. Relapsing is a natural part of life's ups and downs. The biggest mistake people make is thinking a relapse means they've fallen all the way back to the bottom and are totally at square one. Beating yourself up fills you with negative emotions, which ironically drives you right back to the bad habits just to cope. If you're overcoming something like alcoholism and you manage to stay sober for 1 week, but then you slip up and have a drink, you didn't erase that week. You achieved 1 week of success. You have to acknowledge that achievement, forgive yourself for the slip up, and then set a new goal. Aim for 2 weeks next time. Progress is not a straight line. It involves a lot of trial and error. So the ultimate question is, do you really want to improve your life? Breaking the loop isn't magic. It's about understanding dopamine, creating healthy obsessions, and truly upgrading your identity. The blueprint is right here. But what is the one small, slow dopamine habit you are going to substitute today to start rewriting your own identity? Take that first step and take your life back. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.